All right, guys, today we are going to be talking to none other than Ranger Creek Distilling, and we are going to go over some of their things. They were gracious enough to send me over a sample pack. We're going to talk to Josh and see what it's all about. Let's go. You know, I hate these kind of hard openings because I try and get to the point right away, but then I'm like, your name is Josh, right?
You got that part right. We're on a good
Okay, good. We're good to go. So I've been, being a Texas boy, I've been following you guys for a long time through, excuse me, I was out in West Texas this last weekend, and the wind over there is just blowing like crazy, and it got me a little congested. But hopefully some of this whiskey you brought over will clear that up. But anyway, I've been following you guys for a long time. Y'all are always at the Texas Whiskey Festival doing cool things. And yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself personally? And if you want to talk about the brand, that's fine. And if you want to link any socials or anything like that, we'll do it again at the end, but it's kind of a little intro to it.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Josh from Ranger Creek. I've been there for 10 years now. It's been a long journey in the whiskey industry. Texas whiskey's grown quite a bit. A little bit about my background out of high school. I joined the military, was in the Army, spent a little over 7 years in. During that time, had two deployments to Iraq, total of 27 months. Interesting experience, especially to travel and, meet people from all over. Through this time, I homebrewed and may or may not have home distilled. And I decided, hey, this is kind of what I want to do. This is kind of cool. Well, when I got out, things happened, and I worked in the liquor industry for about 7 years and decided, well, you know what? If I'm going to do what I want to do, then I just got to get out there and find out where there's positions available. And that's kind of how it started. I ended up taking on an apprenticeship at Ranger Creek for a while, and then was hired on full time. So I've been there ever since.
All right, that's awesome. So before we get too much further, I have an empty glass here and quite a few samples. So you tell me which one you can talk about it a little bit, which one you want to kind of get into.
Yeah, so a great one to always start off with is the bourbon.
Okay.
I don't recall if I sent you the regular straight. I believe I sent you a single barrel.
A single barrel and the cask strength.
Okay, yes. So the single barrel is a single barrel over 36 that is 70% corn, 16% rye, 17% barley, double distilled, about 9% sour mash. This was a single barrel at 4 years, 7 months, if I remember correctly, at 107 proof. So it is a little higher proof than we normally go for bottling. Our general bottling proof is going to be 96.
Okay.
Unless it's cask strength. So this is a little bit something different. We used a little bit different casks than what we normally use on this one too. Okay.
Do you want to explain the different casks?
So yeah, normally we use Kelvin. That's the majority of our casks. This one was an independent stave.
Okay.
A little bit different profile. A little bit more fruity on the back end than what I normally get out of our Kelvin casks, which are heavier vanilla, cinnamon, a little bit heavier oaky char to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, on the nose just right away, and this is the first whiskey of the night, guys, but it's super nice, and I get the fruitiness that you're talking about on it. Mm-hmm. The proof isn't hitting me over the head, though, which is really nice, too.
Yeah, it's fairly tame for a 107, which I've really enjoyed. I kind of like that, higher 90s up into the 107, 110 on average, yeah.
Right. Wow, the palate on it is really nice. It's really sweet. It's got some caramel, some vanilla, but it's not like overpowering like a lot of, like Kentucky bourbons would be. It doesn't have a whole lot of cherry or anything like that. It just has a really nice palate, and there's none of that what people like to call craft funk or the grain note, I guess, There's none of that really coming through, which I like it. It's not a big deal to me, but there's none of that. It's just really cohesive, and it's a so far an excellent drink. So let's excuse me. Let's start. So Ranger Creek, how long have y'all been around?
So we'll be celebrating our 14th anniversary come December this year. So
Okay.
We're up there with some of the first ones that got started in Texas. I've been there for, like I said, about 10 years now. So almost at the beginning, not quite. We've had a lot of changes since we started. When we first opened, we were running our rack houses as shipping containers in smaller barrels, 5 to 10, and then eventually we moved up to 25-gallon casks, and now we're probably about 90% of our whiskeys going into full-size 53s. And
Okay.
the rest is still 25s. So
okay. Awesome.
We're still trying to bridge that gap. We're trying to get everything to 4 years of age minimum, and it's been difficult because we just can't produce enough. So
right.
the 25s kind of help us a little bit along the way when we're going to put something out at like 2 years. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But it doesn't taste like it has too much oak influence. It doesn't present that at all. It's just a really nice profile, especially on this one. Now you know as well as I do, a single barrel is just that. It's a unique barrel. So this one could be exceptionally good, which is great, and I appreciate that. But yeah, it's really difficult when you have a smaller distillery. You can't just fill up a bunch of 53-gallon barrels and wait. You got to make product and you got to get stuff out there. And did y'all start out doing other products other than whiskey?
Correct. Yeah. So we are combined brewery and distillery. So our name is Ranger Creek Brewing and Distilling under one entity. We were the first combined what we call a Brewstillery in Texas. So when we first opened 14 years ago, and we asked our local state agency, can we do both? They said, well, there's no rules against it, so we don't see why not.
Right.
Well, shortly after we opened, they decided, well, that's not going to be the case anymore. So every place that opened up after us, they had to have 2 separate entities, like it would be Ranger Creek Brewing and then Ranger Creek Distilling, and then at least a wall separating the still from the rest of the equipment.
Okay.
So what's kind of unique about our facility is all the brewing and distilling equipment are all in one warehouse right up against each other.
Oh, wow.
Which you won't be able to see anywhere else. We were grandfathered in, actually.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So what are some of the hardships, and you being there for a minute, what are some of the hardships that y'all have had to deal with, either growing pains or equipment failures or something like that you're just like totally shut down production, or you're like put everything to a standstill until this got taken care of? Can you give us any of those?
Yeah, that is one thing that is probably that sets Ranger Creek apart from a lot of other facilities is the ability to share some equipment. We can't share it all with the brewery, and then how big of a pain in the butt it can be at the same time. So we can share everything up into the mashing process. Once it goes to fermenters, everything has to be set separately between brewery and distillery. But when you share, mills and grist hoppers, everything to the mash tun, water supply, power, just certain things, it can make it a little bit more difficult. Over the years, of course, we've added in more power supplies for pumps to be able to run both at the same time.
Right.
The biggest issue that we have is if one side or the other has plans for that day and something goes wrong and they end up not producing, it kind of pushes us back. So that's one thing to look at. And then other than that, I mean, I would say that's probably one of the largest issues that we have. Sometimes, water tanks where you hold all your water, one side may use the water for the day, and you may have to wait till it's filled back up or something. But we've learned to I think the biggest thing about that is just having a team that can communicate and work together so you can make everything roll out the way it needs to go.
Right. And so your brewery, the employees that are brewers are not necessarily the distillers.
No, we have 2 brewers and 2 distillers, myself and one
Okay.
other distiller.
Okay.
Mhm.
And if you don't mind talking about maybe your still size and fermenters, I know all of my listeners they love to geek out on all the fiddly bits of it. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, for sure. We're not extremely big. We have a 30 barrel mash tun, which is about 900 gallons, so not a whole
Okay.
lot. Our still is 300 gallons. So
Okay.
when we do 2 distillations, a stripping run, it's 3 stripping runs per fermenter to empty it, and then a finishing run per fermenter. So you're looking at basically 4 distillations per fermenter. We have 3 fermenters for whiskey. And between those three mashes, and we do a faints run as well. So we do recycle. We
Okay.
can
Cool.
get about seven barrels out of that 3 mashes, and it takes us roughly about 6 days, 6.5 to get all that out on distillation.
Wow.
So it takes a while. Now we recently have set up a continuous still. It's a little bit smaller
Okay.
one. It should be operational hopefully within the next 45 days.
Okay.
And that one will be able to allow us to pump out 8 barrels within 5 hours. So pretty large upscale in production. What it's going to come down to is fermenter space at that point. And it's a little bit different design than your traditional single tower continuous
Right.
still. It has a stripping tower, and then it goes back into a reboiler, kind of like a thumper in a sense. And then it's got a finishing tower on it as well. So
Oh
a
wow.
little bit different from some that you more commonly see.
Right. Right. And do you feel as the distiller, do you feel like you're going to get the same flavor profile come over, or is it going to change the profile? Because are you doing a pot still right now, or is it a hybrid still as of right now?
It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid
Okay.
column still. What we have
Okay.
now, I think we can get it matched up pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah, especially with that reboiler, kind of like a thumper, we'll be able to pick up a little bit more oils out of that still. So,
Okay.
from my understanding.
I mean, because that's always the thing. Like upscaling, and upscaling is a good thing because you want to be able to produce more barrels, aka get more whiskey in glasses, get more out into the community. But in doing that, you also want the whiskey to taste fairly similar to what you have been producing. I know there's flavor drift and things like that between barrels and stuff, but like you want to try and create some sort of consistency in your profile. So it's really 100%. Cool that you feel like it's gonna just and be able to up production quite a bit.
Exactly, and that won't be the only still that we're using. We'll still use our original. So we'll have stuff that's done on our hybrid that's run more, pot still style, everything open. And we'll still do our, at least I know we'll do our single malts on there. I'm not sure about our rye. Our flagship, our 36 bourbon, the primary product will be done off the continuous probably. But we'll have batches that's still done on the old still. So especially awesome. With doing we really love the faints runs with that still, and I would like to keep on doing that because we use a lot of that for single barrels a lot of the times as well.
Awesome. And what have you seen with doing the faints run? Because you're one of few people that have talked to me about doing a faints run. What are some of the flavor differences, I guess, that you're getting from a normal release to now? Do you barrel them separately, or do you just mix them all into the pot?
We do. So we barrel everything separately. Like I said, we're using that more as our potential single barrel program, and then we can use what we have left over to blend back into our core product. But so, like I said, we do 2 runs at Ranger Creek. We save the heads and we save the tails after that second run. And then we put it all back together and we do a 3rd distillation on it. So having a 3rd distillation rounds it out a little bit more. I've noticed you have a little less heavy grain profile and a heavier ester formulation throughout your product, heavier fruit characteristics and
Okay.
stuff. Yeah.
Okay. That it makes sense to me that, and you have the product already. It's not like you're having to do one extra step. You're like, hey, we have all these leftover faints. Why not reuse them? Because it's still halfway decent product, and there's still a lot of good alcohol in there. We just couldn't fraction out enough to get us what we needed. So let's rerun it again. It's actually, saving you guys a little bit of trouble trying to do a mash for another run. If you could fill a couple barrels of faints, then it actually saves you guys some time, money, and energy. So that's pretty awesome. So, excuse me. So if you guys, as those of you who are watching, you guys have quite a large array of different bottles out there. Is that correct?
Yes. This isn't quite all of them, but this is what I currently have. No. So as far as our core products that we have our bourbon, we have our 44 rye, which I'll get into a little bit. Our single malt, we have our mesquite smoked single malt. We are launching a second single malt that's a completely different recipe. Actually, 2 more single malts in our core lineup. And then beyond that, we have our 300 series, which is our experimental barrel finishing program with our single malts.
Okay.
It kind of has a feel to the San Antonio culture. And then we have our what we call our Whiskies Club. It's a quarterly club where we release a new whiskey and non-whiskey spirit in-house. Actually, at the end of the year, we are changing that name because right now it's in 750 milliliter bottles, and we felt that, well, we don't just make whiskey for the club anymore. So the name will be changed to Distiller's Vault.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you had said something about the rye. So I'm taking very small samples, guys. I actually have another podcast after this one, so I don't want to be not able to do that one. So you actually sent over 2 or 3 ryes. You have the regular, the 94 proof, the Amberana finished, which that's awesome, and the Tejas blend. So which one would you want to get into?
Well, I know you have another podcast, so it depends on if you're going to try everything or not. If you're not going to try everything tonight, I would skip the normal 44.
Okay.
Because I'm sure you may have had that one at one of our tables at a conference before or something. But the Amberana is probably one of my favorites.
Okay.
So out of our lineup, we have a few different products that I think works extremely well with finishing barrels. Okay. One is our rye, and the other is our new single malt recipe that we will be releasing to the market. So what's different about the 44 rye versus other ryes on the market? We kind of tell people, well, if you don't really like rye, try this one. I say it's very different from your average. We use 100% malted rye, no raw. And we use a varietal called Danko. It's grown in Canada. When we first started 14 years ago, there really wasn't any rye being grown in Texas. Now, the rye that we get for the bourbon is grown in Texas as well as the corn. But for the 44, we stuck with the Danko grown in Canada because Texas rye just tasted night and day different from what we were already using. So having a malted varietal like that, it gives it a little bit more mouthfeel, especially when it's a little bit younger. It also, we get a little bit of maybe some apple cidery, kind of floral, eucalyptus kind of notes. But one other thing that really sets it apart, we can't call it a straight rye whiskey, even though it is over 2 years, because we do not use brand new casks, charred oak casks. So we reuse our bourbon barrels. We wanted to focus on what the rye grain itself tasted like instead of having a barrel dominant whiskey.
Got it.
And when you're using a single varietal rye like this, we really rely on yeast pitching rates and fermentation temperatures to really drive the flavor compounds and the esters coming out of the whiskey. Sometimes we'll change up our yeast pitching rates and use different fermentation temperatures and then blending it all in the finish. So
That to me, this is the geekery that we love around here. It is so interesting in the glass. It's unlike any rye I've been around. I've been around a rye or two. It the nose is not like that normal Amberana cinnamon toast crunchiness. It's light. It's cinnamon. Yeah, there's some cinnamon on it or whatever you want to call it, but it's almost like gets a little cakey or something, almost like rye bread, cinnamon rye bread or something like that. It's just really, really nice. And the fact that you're doing, different fermentations and do you, now this is going to get super nerdy, guys. So just, do you stagger your yeast? Do you do some yeast one day and then add more later, have different yeast strains that you use to finish it off, or is that a house secret?
No, we use one varietal yeast. That's, out of all the very large experimental program that we have at Ranger Creek, I'd say we probably have one of the largest, if not the largest in Texas, as far as how long it's been going and everything. We haven't gotten involved into too much with different yeast, but that's something we've been talking about greatly lately. I've got a lot of cool ideas on that, but like I said, we really just drive the different fermentation temperatures, yeast pitching rates, because especially on a core product like this, we already know what it's doing, and that's where the Distiller's Vault or the Whiskey Club comes in.
Yeah, is
on those experimental sides. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Amberana, it is a Brazilian oak. If you're familiar with cachaça, it's kind of like rum in a sense. It's made from pressed sugar cane in Brazil, and Amberana is one of those primary oaks that they use for aging cachaça just for a few months. So it's probably it is the most expensive barrel we've ever purchased. It's quite expensive, but it is gorgeous. It's the most beautiful barrel I've ever seen. Did a great job on it. Everybody I talk to is like, oh, you're only going to want to leave it in there for like a day or two in Texas. It's going to get way crazy. So I was like, okay, so I'll put it in there. With the first 6 hours, like, boom, so much came out of it. And this barrel is so intense, mind you. You can come up, walk about 4 foot up to it, and you can smell it just coming out of the cask.
It's
awesome. That crazy. So we had it in there about 6 hours. I tried it, and I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy within 6 hours. And we came back the next day, and it was just a cinnamon bomb, hot cinnamon. And I was like, this is interesting. I don't know how I feel about this. And I feel like maybe that's why most people say pull it within 24 hours. Well, right. I was like, well, let's just let it go longer, see what it does. And if anything happens, we could always blend back.
Right.
So we ended up going 10 days on this first one, actually.
Oh.
And I know after the first 2 days, I was like, I don't know if it was a good idea living this any longer. But after about 3 days, this creaminess started to come out in it, this creme brulee, vanilla. And as we proofed it down more, it just got more and more creamy on the palate as well.
Yeah.
So it's truly interesting. Apparently, we can get around 30 uses on it. So we've got some pretty exciting things that we're working on with the Amberana. Actually, we're working on won't get too far ahead, but our 300 barrel finishing series, not this year's release, but next year's, we are working on our first dual cask finish.
Okay.
We want to do Amberana with large apple brandy casks and see how that kind of turns out.
Yes, please. So, yes, please. Yeah. And I know Amberana is like the new hot thing out there, and some people are doing it really good. Some people are just, doing it. And I feel like this is doing it right. Like, there's a note there that's definitely the Amberana, but it's not overpowering. Sometimes I've tasted them before where they taste like doe urine, or they get like really weird smelling and tasting. But this one, it's super nice. It's subtle, and since you're using used casks, the oak influence isn't super dominant. You get a lot of that grain influence, but with malted rye, it's not that super heavy rye spiciness. It's a lot lighter, and I feel a lot lighter, and it almost gives an earthy vibe to it. So again, kudos on this one. That's an amazing pour right there.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's probably been that. So that one was part of the Whiskey Club release this last quarter, and it's probably been one of my more favorite finishing barrels recently. So yeah, it just flows very well with the whiskey.
Absolutely. So I was reading some headlines a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about how finishing whiskey, in Scotland and Ireland, that's what they do. They finish whiskey because they get old casks from other people and just reuse them. But they're saying bourbon finishing is fixing to hit a precipice, and it's gonna, nobody's gonna want it anymore. How do you feel about that? Your personal opinion.
Oh gosh, so I think here in the U.S. we'll still. I mean, there'll always be a need for it, but the fact that especially here in the U.S., a lot of people are really starting to open up and really push the boundaries, especially on finishing barrels. I can kind of see that being the case. As far as like the Irish whiskey and stuff, I don't follow it too much these
Right.
days on their production methods and stuff. But when you're a distillery that makes bourbon and you already have those casks, yeah, you're going to be pretty damn sure I'm going to reuse them.
Absolutely.
Because yeah, it's just you have them in your arsenal and use everything that you have, really.
Absolutely. So. And because casks are only getting more expensive. They're not getting cheaper. So, it's just, and the issue is finding good casks, which you've talked about two cooperages that you work with, Kelvin and Independent Stave. They're both amazing, and they're getting the oldest wood they can. But like back in the day, you could get 4-year-old yard-aged, American white oak. And now, I don't know what you guys are getting now, but I'm sure it's not 4 years.
On average, you see the standards about 2.
Yeah.
On average, and I think especially here for Texas, having longer cured oak makes a huge impact on your whiskey, especially because you're just giving more time for the tannins to break down, more sugars develop, and one thing I've learned here in Texas is you can pick up more tannin formulation much quicker than what I've seen in other areas. So
right, and that's the cool thing. Like you guys are using smaller barrels, but yet you're able to leave it in there as long as needed. And I feel like in just the couple samples that I've had, that it's not over oak. There's nothing. How do you compensate for not over? Because you get some whiskeys, Texas whiskeys, that within 18 months they taste like an oak bomb, and you're like, man, we got to get it out there. Is it because they're just using 5-gallon or 2-gallon barrels, or is it they're leaving it in the hot sun in the warehouse? I don't know. How do you combat the Texas heat with your barrels?
So more specifically, San Antonio is a lot different from like Dallas or the coastline. So I can't speak for everybody in Texas, but one thing, years ago, we dropped the proof going into the cask to 118. We were at 125. That already made a huge difference.
Right.
I like even a little bit lower than that personally. Another thing that we really monitor is over the years we've started a little bit rotating our casks a little bit more, because I would pull some out off the top racks and they were just way over tannic. Another technique is élevage, adding a little bit to water and proofing it down and trying to combat that a little bit more too. So I've noticed, especially as it goes longer in the cask and you get more evaporation, the evaporation starts happening faster and faster, and you pick up more tannins because the higher proof. So it helps keep your evaporation in Texas a little bit more controlled, as well as your tannin levels and many other things. Then you can look at the options of starting lower and getting more water-soluble sugars, raising high, get a little bit more alcohol, and then bringing it back down, crashing it a little bit. There's so many different options available.
Yeah, no, you're right, and that's the cool thing. Like moving stuff around it's crazy what, and I'm going to do a full episode about barrel warehouses, but I know that's a really nerdy topic, but it is a thing. Like if you get something off the top rack, it's going to be hot. If you get something off the bottom rack, it might not be ready yet. So, there's a sweet spot. Well, that's why, they always pull Blanton's right off of that one rack, because they know that's the profile they can get. So that to me is super cool. And have you guys moved out of storage connexes or?
Yes, we have. The only thing that we use a shipping container for is our smoker for our mesquite smoked single malt. And what we did on that one is we took a shipping container, welded a barbecue pit onto the back, and put racks and screens on the inside, at which point we lay out the malt and smoke it for a few hours. But we actually have a whole warehouse now with garage bay doors and everything that open up.
Okay. Awesome.
Luckily, we're not too big right now where we still have the opportunity to rotate barrels, a little bit more often. Yeah. But in the future, I see that not being the case.
Right. Exactly. So let's talk about what is the first thing that you personally, and I know roles change a lot in distilleries, especially smaller ones. What's the first thing you do when you get to the distillery each day?
Oh, I walk in, say hi to everybody, because you should always say hi, be friendly. Usually that by that time my assistant's there, so I'll go in and check on him, see how the still's running, depending on what we're doing that day. It's fairly simple. I don't really have an overall routine, I guess you could say. It's more or less go in, check up on what is currently going on operations since people started a little bit earlier than me. And then you usually your usual meetings with the bosses and stuff like that to pull you away from your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's crazy, because I asked this question because I'm off the wall. I try to ask different questions because I don't want, how'd you get started? Where'd you, because whiskey is whiskey. We're all doing the same thing. I want something to be a little different. I was talking to somebody a couple weeks ago, and they were like, well, I don't actually work in the distillery anymore. And I'm like, oh, well, I work online with them. I do counseling for them or whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah. So your day starts, 10 o'clock in the morning? He's like, yeah, I have a cup of coffee and check my email. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's not really what I was asking, but that's fine. But
unfortunately, because of our operations, I don't always have the same schedule every day. Some days I might have to come in super early. Other days I may come in late because we're going to be doing bottling late at night, So that part kind of sucks, but we adjust and make it all happen. So
yeah. So tell us a learning moment. Can you share a memorable learning moment or a mistake that y'all had at the distillery that turned into a valuable lesson?
Oh gosh, there's probably a couple. So probably the one that sucked the most was not making sure our agitator was on when we started mashing in, and all that grain. This is when I first started. All that grain went into the mash tun and just got stuck. And the only way to get it out was get inside with a 5-gallon bucket and scoop about 2,000 pounds of corn out of a mash tun. Other than that, no. What I would say is we had an instance once where we had some bad quality grains come in, and we tried to convince the owners not to use it, and they made us use it anyways. Well, that whiskey never got used, so it just kind of, was wasted. So really, really push your issue. Like, sometimes you have people that aren't always distillers but own companies, and sometimes you just have to really sit down and explain it. So
yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Were you able to salvage the batch at all, like distill it to vodka or anything like that?
Yeah, we ended up distilling it neutral and making tons of bitters with it.
Oh, okay.
But it worked. Yeah. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, like, especially with a smaller distiller, you want to make sure that you're maximizing everything that comes in there, even if it's crap. You know, like if you're like, oh, this isn't drinkable, we got to figure out something. You better clean the floor with it or something, because
Yeah. Well,
no,
I would say that's a good good observation, because that's part of the learning process too, right there.
yeah,
We do some contract distilling for a gin company out of Austin, and called Wild Gins. They have two different products, and I think the second time we were producing it, we were bottling, doing finishing runs and everything else, and I was trying to run back and forth, and didn't realize I hooked the tank from the still up to the neutral grain spirit instead of the gin tank, and I blended gin with neutral grain spirit, which couldn't be used at that point. But a $5,000 hiccup can turn into a $50,000 profit. So learning how to adjust and make things work, and really understanding the process. Because if you're new in the industry and make a mess up, you don't always know what to do. But
no, that's crazy, and it's those mistakes. Unfortunately, you make them one time, and you're like, okay, I'm not gonna doing that again. I know
never
that
again.
But at the same time, it's like in life, that's kind of what happens. We make mistakes all the time, like the only way not to drink and drive is you drink and drive one time, and you either get pulled over, you get so scared, you're like, I'm not doing that again. So it's I don't know why I used that one, but but what if okay. Let me think about this for a second. If you could collaborate with another distillery or a winery or something like that, or an industry professional, like let's say Fred Minnick or somebody like that, Nancy Fraley, whatever, who would it be and why?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. There's quite a few of them, and I've had the opportunity to do collaborations with just people here in Texas, which has been wonderful.
Absolutely.
Our 300 series, I really got the inspiration from that, from Barrel Seagrass. I love how they're blending all these different casks together and coming up with something wonderful, and that's kind of where I'm coming in with the dual cast finish kind of thing, and having the knowledge from people like that are already used to doing, working with the different finishing casks, stuff like that. But honestly, anytime a collaboration comes up, it's always exciting to do it, because there's always room to learn from somebody else that you're not always around. You may ask 100 distillers how to make whiskey and may get 98 different answers. So
yeah. Yeah, no, that's the perfect answer, because it's like I say it like this: anybody who wants to collaborate with me, I'm ready to go. I don't care if it's Joe Schmo, the homeless guy down the road. It doesn't matter. If you want to do a collab, let's go. But at the same time, there are certain people in the industry and certain distillers that are just doing amazing things. They're doing really nice things. Like I always think of Todd Leopold at Leopold Brothers. How they're really doing crazy things with their 3-chambered still rise and stuff like that. Just kind of like innovating in what they do. And I think of Alan Bishop, who used to work for Spirits of French Lick. Now he's moved on. He was really big into using oats in his whiskey. So it's like, just finding somebody who's doing cool stuff and excuse me, man, hanging out with them.
Yeah, so many great examples there. I had an opportunity to meet Todd Leopold a couple years ago at the Bachelor's Ball here in Texas. His tent was table was right next to ours. Nice guy, so intelligent. Great history buff. Just fun guy to be around. I met Alan Bishop a couple years ago, and he's wonderful too. Lots of great knowledge. So.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, as you can tell, I'm coughing my head off a little bit, so I need to get another drink on me. So where do you want to go from here? There is 4 grain and a bloody bourbon.
Yeah. before we go those, I'll just talk a little bit about this one, and then we'll move right over. You
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So the Tejas Rye, that one was a collaboration that was done with Jake that puts on the Texas Whiskey Festival every year. Tejas series, he just finds barrels from different places and then takes it to a distillery of his choosing, and he does a collaboration. So this is the third one in the series, third one that we've done with Jake. But it was our rye finish in Spanish orange wine barrels.
Oh, wow.
A little bit different. That's available only at the distillery. So the other ones you were talking about, so you already tried the Ambrano. That was part of the Whiskey Club. The Bloody Bourbon is Bloody Butcher Red Corn.
Okay.
So what that one is, so we wanted to show people really what it tastes like. So we have our control, which is the 36 Straight Bourbon.
Right.
And then we just substituted the yellow corn, which is 70% yellow corn, for Bloody Butcher Red Corn.
Oh, wow.
So only thing changed is the type of corn within our bourbon. So you can really have control. The 4-grain is a little bit different. So we use our traditional yellow dent corn grown here in Texas. We use Texas grown raw triticale. We used a little bit of malted wheat instead of raw wheat, and then we use malted barley. So instead of using what most people use, wheat and rye, we used triticale and malted wheat.
That's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think I want to get into that one, the 4-grain, because that to me is really sounds nice.
So this 4-grain was 2 years, 10 months old, I believe, if I remember correctly, out of 53-gallon casks. It was double distilled, 9% sour mashed on it.
So do you always do sour mash, or have you done some sweet mash as well?
Oh, we do sweet mash too. So we generally go about 4 generations, 3-4 max on our back set. So we don't go too crazy with it. Although I've done a lot of sour mashing experiments over the years, everything from sweet mash up to about 24, 27% sour mashed.
Oh, wow.
The range I like is about 7 to 11, somewhere in there. But I'm going to start doing a lot of sour mashing experiments with crossing back set from one whiskey to another, or letting it sit out like a dunder pit, kind of in a sense that you do with rum, and then inoculating it with specific strains of Brettanomyces to drive different flavor compounds.
That is super interesting. And guys, this is the type of nerdy stuff, and when I say nerdy, I mean that in the best way. This is the kind of stuff that us Texas boys are all about. Like we want to make a good bourbon, and you guys are making great bourbon, but we also want to try, me being the consumer, but we also want to try strange, weird shit that's going on out there. Like there's so many strange, not strange, but it's strange to the bourbon community. So many different processes that you can do that just makes it totally changes the whiskey. It totally changes every aspect of it. And I can tell you have a Shed Distillers background, because they love to do that stuff. I've been a longtime supporter of Jesse from Stillet, and he does all kinds of crazy stuff. He just distilled Pop-Tarts. Anyway, long story, but it's one of those things where it's like just trying new things, seeing, hey, is this going to work? And the fact that the owners give you the availability to do that, and they're not just saying, no, make this bourbon over and over and over again until you're sick of it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how the Distillers Vault Whiskey Club is. It started, I think, about 8 years ago. I was there for about a year and a half, 2 years, and the other distiller that was there at the time and I wanted to produce something. So we asked one of the owners, and they're like, oh, hell no. So we're like, okay, cool. Well, we got all this leftover grain. Let's just make it and not tell them. And we put the barrels aside, and 2 years, I think it was about 3 years later, we brought them this sample and it was like, here, try this. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is good. What is this? We're like, remember that thing you told us not to make? Well, we kind of made it anyways. And they were like, oh man, this is cool. Well, what are we going to do with it? And then the idea was to start a club, a quarterly club, and make 2 different products for every quarter and release it to the club members. So, and it's been going strong ever since. And the owners get actually very excited about it every time.
That's awesome. Now this club membership, is that distillery only or is it online at all?
So it is this next quarter, August, next month, will be the last one where it's available only at the distillery.
Okay.
We will have an option where you can go onto our website. I don't know 100% how it works, but the way I understand it is you'll be able to go onto our website and purchase it. And then if you're in Texas, because it's only be available in Texas, it will go to a liquor store in Austin who has a warehouse. And then the order will go to them, and then the liquor store will send it out from their warehouse to your house.
Got it.
So that will start in November is when I believe that one will start. And also currently they're in 375 milliliter bottles. It's going to go to a 750 milliliter. And of course the name change with a new updated label design. Got it.
That's really cool. And let me tell you, this 4 grain, for one, it went down really easily. It was really easy to drink. It was really nice. It had this subtle sweetness throughout the entire thing that wasn't spicy. It didn't have a big pop of anything. It's just super nice. Like I could see putting that on a big ice ball, sitting outside on the front porch. Like that's a good porch sitting whiskey, if you want to call it that. That was excellent. So do you have backlogs of this distillery release only, or is it first come, first serve, and when they're sold out, they're sold out?
So right now we're not capped. We're about 150 to 180 people that we can still allow on board. So now once that hits for online in December, I'm sure we'll fill it up very quickly, and it will probably be a waiting list kind of thing. Somebody drops out, then you can get in.
Right. Okay. So what are some of the other? Okay, so when you're not drinking Ranger Creek whiskey, what is one of your other whiskeys that you like to drink? It doesn't have to be from your distillery. Just where do you go if you want a nice pour?
Oh gosh, there's so many great ones. I like to support all my friends here in Texas, of course. Probably if I was to talk about some of the bigger whiskey houses out of like Kentucky and stuff, I like most of all the stuff that comes out of Heaven Hill. I love Heaven Hill bottled and bond. One of my favorite go-to. When you can get it, can't always get it. Buffalo Trace makes some great stuff, but I think overall, some of the Heaven Hill stuff, Elijah Craig, the Booker's series, kind of a range. Four Roses single barrel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And so it's kind of interesting that being a bourbon producer, you're like, okay, I need to find a profile. You guys have found your profile. It doesn't match Kentucky's profile, but it's still in the same vein, if that makes sense. Like it can compete with those guys. Like I could pour a side by side, and they would say, hey, this is a less oaky influenced. They might say it's younger, because the Kentucky boys equate really heavy oak and stuff like that to age, because that's most of the time what it is. But I think it could compete really well with the big boys out there personally.
Thank you.
So what do you go into any other spirits like gin or tequila or anything like that?
100%. Well, I kind of have to in a sense, because for our club members, we make non-whiskey spirits too every quarter. So this last quarter, we actually released an absinthe, more traditional. I think I sent you a little sample, so hopefully you're a big fan of absinthe.
I'm working on it.
Okay. So it's very traditional. And we release that and the rye finished in the Amburana cask together in a release. So they actually make a very good Sazerac together, believe it or not.
I bet.
We try to do stuff that you can maybe use with one another,
Mm-hmm.
or we may have a couple releases of a non-whiskey spirit where you can combine them all and make a cocktail. Like I would love to be able to do an aviation, so why not make creme de violet and maraschino liqueur and gin, another one, and then you have everything in your cocktail room to make that. So another reason why we started to not just do the whiskey club, but to do non-whiskey spirits as well in our tasting room, in order for us to provide customers with somewhat of a full cocktail bar. Everything has to be made in-house. We can't just go to the liquor store, buy bottles off the shelf and use them behind the bar. It don't work that way. So if we want to be able to make a Sazerac for 1/4, we make some absinthe. Or, we were working on our second aquavit for this next quarter. It will be dill, caraway, cumin, fennel, and coriander. It'll be aged in new casks for a month and a half. And then in the cask, we'll have golden raisins, and then we'll add a touch of honey to it afterwards. So like more of a new age style of a aquavit. Our last one was very traditional. So what we do is we try to go traditional, kind of figure out the in and out workings of how to produce the spirit. And then after that, number 2, number 3 will be a different recipe every time. But we may not bring back that category of spirit for another 2 or 3 years in the whiskey club.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So you're constantly just innovating, trying new things, getting out there. The fact that you made it absinthe in the, I mean, that is like a magnum opus to most distillers. They're like, if I can make a good absinthe, I know how it works, because, and I don't know if I've talked about this in the past or not, but like when you're distilling grain or a whiskey mash, it does fracture out a little bit in the distillation process, but it is more cohesive. But when you're distilling something like botanicals or something like, I just recently talked to Gavin over at Real Spirits, and he did the Pachuga, right? And when you have a meat hanging into the thing, it definitely comes over at a different time in the distillation process, and how you can pinpoint all of those out. It's really cool. Now, when you do your gins and your absinthe, are you distilling all the botanicals together, or are they separate botanicals in distillation?
They're all together.
Okay.
My assistant really wants to do a gin where everything's fractioned off and blended back together. Right. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna really. It's a cool thing to do. I don't know if I want to do it to make 80 gallons of product. That, and the fact that you may have some waste in there. Yeah. You may have too much of this botanical, or vice versa. Yeah, it makes me a little bit nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, the way they do it, I mean, yeah, it's like, and then you have this leftover, Angelica root spirit that is mainly tails, and you're like, what do I do with tails from Angelica root? I can't really redistill it. It's going to come over in the distill. So yeah, it gives you quite a bit of waste. But no, that's really cool. Yeah, the absinthe, to me, I've been working on absinthe. I've been trying to get into it. My thing is, it gets a little harsh for me, and you need to drink it at a high proof, obviously. It gets a little harsh for me, and so I gotta, water it down probably more than I'm supposed to. So,
my average, what they recommend for your traditional absinthe cocktail, for 1 part absinthe to 2 to 3 parts water on average. And when you get that louche, that's when you're at the right point. So yeah.
Okay. Okay, so maybe I'm doing it right. So you might be like the sample that I have is 128 proof. So you might be proofing it down to below sub 50%, correct?
Yeah, 40 to 60%.
Okay.
Percent. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if you want,
Cool.
add you a little bit of simple syrup to it to sweeten it back. But yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So I have one more question for you. Well,
Yes, sir.
I mean, we can keep going. We can keep going as long as you want. Where was it? Oh, um, I've done a couple episodes on whiskey and music, right? And so if you could pair your whiskey, pick one or two, and pair it with some sort of music, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Honestly, it's a little bit more difficult for me. I don't listen to a ton of music. I'm more like a meditation kind of music person.
Okay.
But it may sound weird, but I would say maybe like a band that just kind of like they're able to do a little bit of everything and never really the same kind of thing.
I got
Keep it always fresh and
Right.
something new, but it still has a little bit of that, Ranger Creek entourage, I guess you could say. But I think one of the best compliments that I've got, that's something I've really strived to do, because we make a wide range of products, is to try to make each individual whiskey stand out as its own individual product, instead of having, every single one of these have this distinct underlining characteristic, and I can see that is Ranger Creek with no doubt, kind of thing. And that's the one thing I've always tried to stay away from. Yeah.
That to me is really cool, because there are some distilleries that you're like, oh yeah, that's that note. That's that note I get. That's the Jim Beam peanutty note, or whatever, or the George Dickel Flintstone vitamin note, or whatever you want to call it. So that to me is super cool. You're just trying to change it up just enough to where the profile is for that specific bottling. That's it.
Yeah.
This is going to taste like this. Everything else is going to taste different. We don't have a house flavor, and that's really cool, because it kind of sets you apart, because a lot of distilleries are trying to, I hate to say it, they're trying to kind of blend in. They want all their stuff to kind of taste the same, because if you like this SKU, you'll probably like this SKU too. And if you make them not overly different, but they are different. The few samples that I've tried, they are different. They're very cohesive. They work well together, but they are very different as well. So that to me is super cool. I applaud you for that. I know it's difficult being a distiller. I don't know personally, but I know it's difficult being a distiller, and some people like one of your products, but they might not like the other one. So that's so have you ever
about it is like, oh, you don't like this one, try this one then.
Right.
They're totally different.
Right. Yeah, and because they are different, and they're going to give you a different profile. Like when people come up to me when I do personal whiskey tastings, and they're like, I don't like rye whiskey. I'm like, no, you don't like the rye whiskey that you've had. There's plenty of rye whiskey out there that you're going to like. I can find one for you. Let me pour you, whatever this, have you tried this 44 rye? No, you haven't. Okay, try this one real fast. But yeah, no, it's really cool that you guys get to innovate. You get to do the thing. So tell us a little bit about the 300, a little bit more, I guess, about the 300, because I'm really into single malt personally. I started out being a Scotch guy, and I never left. I love bourbon. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But, I think I have the 303, if I'm not mistaken. That's what is that one again?
The 303 was the Mexican sherry cask. So the sherry barrels from Mexico, which uses American oak instead of Spanish or French oak. And then, so we started this series off actually for the 300 anniversary of San Antonio, the tricentennial celebration. And we release this for Fiesta every year. So the Sugar Skull kind of gives, the San Antonio heritage a little bit. And then each bottling, it will change a little bit. So 304 was Mexican sherry. 304 was peach brandy barrels. So we didn't make a peach whiskey. We just took our single malt and finished it in peach brandy barrels.
Got it.
And then our most recent one from last year, which I think the distributors have like 5 cases left. It's our 305 was blackberry brandy barrels, which actually won best in class and best in show at the Texas Whiskey Festival this year. So,
wow,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That says a lot, because those guys are Texas whiskey freaks, and for them to put your guys up there, that especially with something that's it's not your typical bourbon, it's not your typical weird balcones release they're coming out with or whatever. That's really cool that you got that sort of props from peers, which is really nice.
Yeah, like I said, that kind of what got me interested into all those finishing barrels was having some of the stuff that Barrel was doing, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Now I'm not going to go like try to copy what they're doing, but I'm going to try individual things that I like, and then we'll start blending stuff and work it up on the pyramid scheme, kind of thing.
Right.
Now, if you're really big into single malts, I don't know if you had the opportunity to try it when you were at the Texas Whiskey Festival this year.
I did.
We had a small sample, but we had this last quarter for the year for the distillers vault. We have our mesquite smoked single malt, which the new make went into quarter cask from Isla. So I'm sure you can figure out which distillery makes quarter casks in Isla.
Yes.
But so it's been sitting in those casks for 3 years now. And that will be released at the end of the year. And if you like peat, it's wonderful. So, yeah.
All right. I will definitely look out for that, because I am a peat head. What's funny is once you get into peat, and I don't know if you're obviously you have to be into it a little bit, being the distiller, but once you get into peat, you kind of get acclimated to it, and then you try to find the fruity notes around the peat. So it's like, you get the peat, you're like, oh, that's nice, but then you're like, oh, but there's some honeysuckle and some this and that around it. It's just kind of strange when you're going into the smokier. And are all the 300s smoked, or are they not?
We actually took smoked off the label.
Okay.
Because, like I said, we make 2 single malts, one smoked and one's not. And our one that is smoked, it's not heavily smoked by any means. It like a lowland smoked malt, I guess you could say, if you're familiar with that area. It's very light. And then 300, what we're doing, we're taking 1 or 2 of those, or a blend of the 2. So the base for 300 may be slightly different from batch to batch, depending on what the finishing barrel is and how we're going to work that out the best. So speaking of, let me talk a little bit about our single malt lineup, if you don't mind, real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So we have a single malt that's been out for many years, and the name of it was changed. It was bought out by another company. So the name is being changed to Mesquite Smoked Single Malt. Now, this will be a whole lineup. The Mesquite, it will be called Texas Landmark. That'll be our single malt series. Kind of like when you go and you see a bottle of Lefroy or something, and all the bottles look similar somewhat, but they have a few things that change. It'll be in that aspect. So it'll be Texas Landmark, and then we'll have a mesquite smoked version. We'll have our original number 2, which is a completely different recipe, non-smoked, more like a Highland malt. And then we'll have our 3rd version of it, which is our single malt 2, being finished in Oloroso sherry butts.
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. So those will be our full-time single malts right there.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. No, I mean, it's really cool to see especially Texas single malt, getting out there and getting recognized and getting people kind of, I mean, again, I'm a bourbon lover, but getting people kind of onto something a little bit different, and like doing this rye, that 100% malted rye. That's just a little bit different, but it's also very nice. Doing the Bloody Butcher corn instead of just regular yellow tint corn, like trying all these different things is really showing you guys' innovation. And in this industry, I'll put myself in it too, I guess. But in this industry, you have to stay innovating, because you, as a smaller company, you have to innovate, or you're just going to get ran over because a bigger company came in there and they have 30 bottles on the shelf and you can't compete with it. So how is the distribution with y'all right now?
So right now we're mainly throughout Texas. We in the past, it's not always readily available. We've shipped small amounts to New York, California, Tennessee. We've shipped to Sweden, Japan, Germany, Italy. And we're looking at venturing outside of that a little bit eventually. The
Right.
problem is we can't even make enough for Texas, and the goal is to get our whiskey a little bit older as well, all within a standard age.
Right.
I think our sweet spot here in Texas, that makes, you can't go wrong with it as long as everything's working out and you're doing everything you should to make your whiskey the best. I think,
Right.
3.5 to 5 years is
Right.
really good for Texas. So
it really is. It really is. I've been able to try some really great 4-year-old, 5-year-old Texas whiskeys, and then you try the younger versions of them, and you're like, you can tell how it's evolved. I have some old school Andalusia whiskey, from like 2019, where it was barely 2 years old, and now it's bumping past 4 years on some of their bottles, and it's like, okay, now you can see how the flavors are just more developed, and they're just in there, and the color is fairly similar. They're not getting as much oak influence as well, which is really nice. But yeah, any other things you want to talk about before we wrap it up, brother?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about a few things that we're working on right now, especially if those of you who are that are in Texas and interested in the Distillers Vault Whiskey Club program. We have, of course, like I said, the quarter cask finish, the peat barrel that's coming out next. After when that barrel is done, we are going to take our white rum and we're going to fill white rum up into those peat casks. A peated rum. I don't. That sounds awesome to me.
Yeah, it sounds cool.
But no, we did a 100% corn whiskey. It was made with red, white, and blue corn. Cool stuff. We're working on some brandies. If you can think of it, we've probably thought of it too, or we're working on it already.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's really cool. And again, I'm just going to harp on this again. You guys are doing everything grain to glass, right? I mean, you guys are overseeing everything, and you're trying to get, Texas is great we got a lot of room here, but a lot of grains don't grow here too. So I understand that, but you guys are doing it the right way, and you guys are trying to just find your place in the whiskey community. And I feel like if you keep presenting the whiskeys that you brought here, and I actually can't wait to get into this absinthe. I'm not going to do it tonight. That's going to be a weekend thing, because that'll blow my palate out.
Podcast.
Absolutely. But I will tell you this: I can't wait to see y'all's future. What you guys have got going on. I'm sure you've got big things, especially with this new still coming into play. And all that stuff. I'm sure after that, you'll be laying down more casks. You'll have more, you'll have to expand the barrel warehouse. That's normally how it goes. Everything just gets bigger and bigger. But I can't thank you enough for coming on here and hanging out with me for a little bit. Why don't you tell everybody if you want to do your personal and the business socials, just let me know. And then I'll also have them in the description down below.
Yeah, if you want to visit Ranger Creek, it is www.drinkrangercreek.com. That's where you can find us. I've kind of really pulled away from the social media myself, so I don't do a whole lot of it. But definitely, if you're in San Antonio area, come check us out. If not, you know what? Support your local whiskey. Definitely. If you don't know if there's any local Texas whiskey, look them up. Go and figure out how they're doing it and see how they're supporting local farmers and everything else. Yeah.
Absolutely. And whereabouts in San Antonio are y'all located?
So we are on the north side. If you were coming in from Austin on 35,
okay.
We're as soon as you come into Austin, if you are familiar with San Antonio area, there's a big building called Cowboys Dance Hall on the left-hand side. We're right on the opposite side on the right-hand side of the road. So back in an industrial complex. So,
okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
No, I've never been to you guys' distillery. I need to get over there and hang out for a little bit.
Come on out.
It's just one of those things. Like, I think I go places and then I realize I don't go 20 miles outside of my house. Like, what am I doing here? But
in Texas,
anyway.
In Texas, it's a lot of driving. So yeah.
It is. I've been saying I'm going to go up to Iron Root this year, and I'm like, yeah, but that's like an 8-hour drive. I don't know if no, it's not that long, but it feels like it. I don't know if I want to make that drive all in one day. That's a long haul.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I appreciate it, and thank everybody who's listening and watching. Thank you so much. Make sure you follow, like, subscribe, do all the algorithmic things that we have to do to get this thing growing. And I appreciate y'all. Go visit Ranger Creek, please. I'll have everything in the description down below. And until next time, keep your spirits up.